So while I was working on the new Space Quest video, it occurred to me that it might be neat if I show you guys some of the behind-the-scenes work that goes into the videos. Also, a couple of you have expressed interest in that as well. So I'm not going to wait for any kind of consensus on whether to do it. I'm just going to do it. Okay. But of course, I don't want to show you any of the work that I'm doing on the current video because that would be kind of spoilery. But I am going to do it. I'm going to do some screen capturing and put that part together. But that's not the point of this video. What I want to do first is kind of set that up and just kind of explain in general terms my own personal philosophy and my approach for how I construct a Let's Play. And then, I guess cite examples from my Real Mist in Exile series, just to kind of get a general idea of how to approach it. And then what I want to do is actually show some footage of the video editor, and in this case the Space Quest DOSBox, and just not just technically but really from a design perspective, and show how to construct a specific piece of a Let's Play series, or at least not how to do it, because everybody's got their own style, but just how I do it, because I think that I've got kind of a unique approach, and it's one that takes a whole lot of work, and it's so I'm not saying anybody else should do it this way. It's just the way I personally do it, because I find it gives the most satisfying results for me. So I have to make this video now in order to set up that other video, which I have to make while I'm working on part 2 of Space Quest. So I have to set that up now so that I'll know what I'm talking about when I make that. But that video probably can't come out until I actually finish part 3, just to avoid spoilers. So how do I approach making a Let's Play series? Well, the first thing I do is I just try to keep the main goal in mind. There are certain games out there, adventure games, that I believe deserve a certain kind of tribute. I believe that they derive their greatness from the amount of detail and depth that they have, right? Obviously, you've got your main storyline, you've got your main puzzles and their solutions, okay. But there might also be, some extra backstory or an alternate set of solutions, or there could be a lot of things that people might generally miss about a certain game, because there's a huge library of games out there, right? Usually, you download a game and you play through it once, and then you go on to the next one. And a lot of resources out there are game walkthroughs, you got video walkthroughs, you got blind LPs, people in a similar boat just solving the main puzzles. And the thing is, when you're solving these puzzles, when you're going through the game, you're trying to connect all the dots and see how everything fits together, but you never see it all the first time you play through, right? It's just like a movie, right? You see a movie second or third time, and then you start seeing, oh, I didn't notice that before. And a game is much harder than that, because it's interactive, so you have to actually initiate the new action that'll trigger the thing that you didn't see before. So I got to cram more detail into it, but then I got to logically string it out to where it's not confusing or it doesn't drag out. It actually creates it creates like a large puzzle in its own right. How to get all of this out on the table in a rigorous and entertaining way. I will admit, however, I do also like my view counts. So I do, when I make these things, bear in mind the audience that I'm speaking to. I figure that my audience generally fits on a spectrum of, I guess, the two extremes being one, somebody that really knows absolutely everything about the game already and is just obsessed with it and is therefore finding everything on the internet about the game. So these people are the ones that are going to fact check you on everything, right? And then on the other end of the spectrum is somebody that has no idea. It's just looking for something entertaining on the internet, relevant to gaming or whatever, or maybe even adventure gaming, but, maybe they're adventure game fans, that's a little further in the spectrum, but, they don't know this game that well. Okay, so this is kind of your audience range, and I actually try to appeal to both camps, in that I want to be able to present, the obscure stuff, whether it's, Easter eggs or backstory or, alternate lines, alternate, puzzle lines or whatever. But like I said, those people over there, they might fact check you on things, so, you got to make sure you get that part right. But then, those kinds of things, those kind of really obscure details may not be as interesting to people on the other side who just, want to see, all the cutscenes and things like that. So, you want to make that side interesting too. And that's really, I guess, kind of the side that, I'll be focusing on here because, when you construct your path through the game, you're really thinking about how to present, the game as a whole. Most of the game is, going through the storyline, solving the mainline puzzles. So, keeping it, entertaining for them. That's, I guess, kind of the basic building block, and then you sprinkle in all the obscure details throughout over here. So, hopefully everybody will stick around and enjoy your stuff. That's the end goal, right? So what we have so far is that we want a thorough, accurate, and entertaining presentation of the game. That isn't much to go on. And it's pretty subjective. Well, it's going to have to stay subjective because, it's the nature of the whole thing. But you will see as we go through this that overall the reasoning is pretty rigorous one step to the next as we flow all the way through. But we already have something to work on here because you can already see kind of the balancing act that's developing. Because if you're being too thorough, then you might start to get boring, which is kind of the opposite of entertaining. Another thing is if you try too hard to be entertaining, which humor is its own science anyway, but also specifically when it comes to a Let's Play, you don't want to lose relevance, right? Because then you're going to start pissing off the people. Especially, you're probably going to piss off everybody, but especially the people that, really, they're really hardcore on that particular game. They already, that side of the spectrum I already talked about. So yeah, there's already some things to go off of here, but to really have kind of the top-down approach, which is how I always look at things. What is the whole point of this thing, and then you just kind of work your way down to the specific details of, what is this comment I'm gonna say in this part of the video right here? But you start at the big part. The lighting is terrible here. But you start at the big picture and you just work your way down. You're always everything down here. You're always thinking about all the stuff above it. So you want to present the game, which means that you can kind of start plugging pieces in to your series that have to be there, right? Like all the cutscenes have to be there, all the mainline puzzles have to be there. Most of the interesting deaths, if it's an adventure game, right? It's should probably be there if the game has deaths, right? And you just but you assemble this starting from the perspective of the game. You don't say, oh, I want to, I don't want to create my own meme and then start thinking about ways I can inject that in and then say, oh, well, I want to go this way so that I can say my stupid meme, and if I went this way and I wouldn't be able to say that at that time, then I'm just going to ignore that part of the game, right? You don't want to do that. You always want to prioritize presenting the game and everything important within the game. You kind of prioritize, okay, these things I have to do just because they're part of the game, and then there's these other really interesting things that you don't technically have to do to complete the game, but you really should show them. Any decent presentation of the game would have them, and then you just kind of you kind of string all these together, and then you start kind of thinking about how you're going to what you're going to do in order to string all that together and make it work. But this is a balancing act, right? You don't want to sacrifice your presentation so much that all you're doing is just presenting trivia about the game, because this is the age of the internet. All the information is probably available somewhere else, right? If I just want encyclopedic knowledge, I can look that up. So, this is your series. It is your, special place on the interwebs to do your thing and inject your personality in it. So you gotta throw that in somewhere. How does that balance out? So if your series is going to show off your encyclopedic knowledge of the game in an entertaining way, then it's going to quickly become obvious to any viewer who might stumble upon your videos that you know what you're doing. It's pretty tautological, of course. But I bring this up because that you don't, when deciding what your style is going to be, you can't really control that, right? You don't want to control it. You already decided that you're going to show off your knowledge of the game. So the only real knob, I guess, that you have to tweak here is how much are you going to acknowledge that, openly, that you have this encyclopedic knowledge. And so one option, the simple answer is yes, you do, which I guess we can say you go into basically teacher mode or lecturer, right? So as you go through the game, you're saying, here are all these cool facts and, Easter eggs, and if you click here, this is what happens, and if you do it in a different order, this other thing happens, and you just know all this stuff already, and you just kind of you just walk through all the stuff, in a very orderly fashion, and that's one way. But then the other way is you don't acknowledge, at least not openly, that you have this knowledge. Which I guess we can call that explorer mode or adventurer mode or something, where you have, if you're not going to acknowledge that you have the knowledge, whatever, then the opposite of that is you're playing as if you're playing the game for the first time. You're kind of pretending you're doing that. Now, obviously, when you do that, you're not mocking first-time players. That doesn't make sense. You're just going through and you're talking through it in a way that may perhaps be more relatable. And of course, anyone that's seen my videos will know that this is the approach that I take as someone that I play, where I kind of pretend to be someone that is naive and doesn't know doesn't know the solutions to the puzzles. The reason I do that is quite simply that allows for a much wider range of expression. So basically you become an actor in a way. I didn't say a great actor, but an actor nonetheless, because you're pretending to be someone you're not. Now, it's not to say that I never go into teacher mode. In fact, there are certain places where it's obvious that you should go into teacher mode. One simple example would be like in the Real Mist playthrough, when we actually, after we completed the game, when I showed all the Easter eggs, I really just went down the laundry list of here are all the eggs that I am aware of. There's really no other way to do it. I mean, I guess you can try to do it in Explorer mode. You could just be like, well, let's deduce how we'll arrive at the gas egg. I'm imagining, oh, well, no one will be in this room with the gas on but the fire out or whatever. So let's see if they put an Easter egg in here. That doesn't make sense. Or let's play with the planetarium buttons and I'll just put in random codes. And it's actually kind of a funny thought. That would not work. That would just not work. I guess another example, maybe sort of semi teacher mode, not really. But I guess I went into it in Exile a few times when I just kind of explained stuff. But at that one I was a little more careful to make sure that almost everything I said in in the observatory and everything was stuff that we had already seen in the game previously. Like if there were journal entries that we had already found and I was just kind of synthesizing it, I was putting it together and just kind of packaging it up. And actually I think that's actually a perfect example of why you make a series like this, because the journal pages in Exile are just they're scattered around everywhere and you find them out of order. Even if you try to read them in order, that's assuming you don't have a few entries missing, it's still it's pretty dense. Trying to put it all together. So it's good to just kind of have these breather moments where you just take, minute and a half and just kind of piece together. This is, this the chunk of the storyline that we've pieced together up to this point. But that's kind of, I don't know, I guess you could argue that's kind of teacher mode, but not really, because you're not bringing in outside knowledge. You're actually using what's in the game. So I don't know exactly how it categorizes. But most of the time, I am pretty solid in the explorer mode territory. Like I said, it allows for a wider range of expression. But also, what it really does is it allows you to tell your own story parallel to the main story, the one in the game. So, like, I guess, in Real Mist, I had that, that real goofy approach kind of at the beginning when I was just like, oh, let me tell you the big background story here. There's a book that falls out of the sky and you know nothing, right? What I'm doing there mainly is I'm really trying to encapsulate in my own goofy way the perspective that the creators intended, which is just that. You find a book, fall into a world, and know nothing about what's going on. That's really the environment they attempted to instill. But you'll see, as we progress and we get more information, we learn the storyline. I get smarter and smarter, and which requires, I guess, a little patience. I got part 1 of Real Mist is my most hated video, whatever. And there were some people on there criticizing, saying, if you don't know anything about the game, don't play it. Which is kind of a funny thing, because the whole approach of of Explorer mode, it's all tongue in cheek. It's obviously tongue in cheek if I'm going to be especially in those early Real Mist videos, giving these these bits of trivia, inject that in all the time. If I say, I don't know what this machine does, what does this thing do, what does the button do, I don't know anything. Oh, by the way, this isn't how it works in the original, right? Those two ideas are completely incompatible, right? How do you not notice that? So it's all tongue-in-cheek, right? But this cat's gonna throw me off of all the different points I wanted to make here. But I get smarter as I go along, to the point where, by the time we get to the end, it's like, part 32, and I think it's part 32, and I finally give an explanation of the intro. Right, I actually say these are all the events that led up to the intro to the game. That seemed to be a much more logical place to put that speech, as opposed to just throw it away at the beginning of the game. That's just, yeah, it doesn't work. It would completely kill what I perceive to be the intended effect that the creators were making when you first fall into the book at the beginning of the game. So I delay that explanation of the intro until we've completed the game, really, because the last two videos are just Easter eggs. So moving on to the next thing, kind of the top, working from the top down. The most important thing was showing off all these extra things in the game, presenting them in a logical way. The next thing is adopting a style, which I think the best one most of the time is kind of that naive explorer mode thing. Okay. So I guess kind of the next thing to look at would be travel, would be the course you plot, right? The path you take, the navigation through the game, whatever you want to call it, right? In what order are you going to visit all the places and do all the stuff? And there is kind of a bit of a science to this because of the other things I just mentioned. And it's one of those things that there's kind of a balancing act to, right? Because especially when you think about those two modes, with the teacher mode versus the explorer mode, they would have two very different paths, right? Because there's always, in every game, there's kind of this optimal solution where you have kind of the quickest path through the game that just always turns left at the fork or whatever, and does it goes this exact way, zigzag around to do all the things in exactly the right order, so you beat the game as quickly as possible. Someone in teacher mode might be able to show that off. Doesn't really work with explorer mode. I mean, you could try to artificially prop that up and say, oh, look, I just so happened to do everything right the first time. Not really that believable. Not that we're really trying to be too believable here, but somewhat believable. But also, you do that, and you might even sacrifice some of the important things in the game that you need to show off, and that's the main thing you don't want to do. Okay, so when you're planning your route through the game, you just kind of keep all this stuff in mind, and it's this balancing act where you want to show off all the things you need to show off. You need to make it somewhat logical for an explorer. But you don't want to drag it out so much that it just starts dragging out, getting really tedious. So, because you don't want to double back too many times, right? Which is actually what would really be realistic for a first-time player, right? Someone that's never played the game before, doesn't know any of the solutions to puzzles. They're very likely to go round and round because they're genuinely stuck. Well, because this is all kind of tongue-in-cheek explorer, we don't really want to be doing that. So yeah, that's kind of the basic principle there. I guess with Real Mist and Exile, these are kind of simple games in that each of them had their kind of compartmentalized ages. Right, here's the main island, and then here are your other ages that you can visit in any order. So it's just a basic matter of choosing what the optimal order of the ages is, which I actually admitted about Exile. I didn't even think about that. I thought they were all pretty much equivalent, so I just picked the order I chose, and then the only thing that did was that it affected precisely what my speeches in the observatory were. Had we found the journal pages in a different order, I would have had to write those slightly differently, but those are small details. Realness was actually a little bit more thought out, because you had the 4 ages, and my main line of thinking was I didn't want to find the vault until the end. I mean, there are multiple solutions to this. You could actually find the vault early and then forget about it, right? You can. There are other ways to do about it, but it made the most sense to me to delay that as long as possible. So one of the 2 ages with the torn piece of paper had to be at the end, either stone ship or channelwood. And then I observed that you look at that pair, and then it just so happens that the other pair were the 2 with the 2 ages with the direction sounds. So it doesn't mean you have to do it this way, but it just kind of fit to do these 2 first and then those 2 second. And specifically did mechanical for Selenitic to be able to do the Selenitic maze more easily, to already know the sounds. Now, actually, that's kind of an interesting point. If you do Selenitic before mechanical, you might actually have a more interesting time in the Maze Runner, because you have to, maybe more interesting and also a longer time because you're going to hit, dead ends and stuff, but, you can deduce the sounds that way. That's actually not the issue. The issue is going back to mechanical and saying, well, we already went through all of this shit to figure out all the sounds, and now they're just handed to us on it. Maybe you could play an angry gamer right there and say, oh, we went through all that. Actually, that's kind of interesting. I didn't think of that until just now. Maybe I should have done it that way. I don't know. But I actually kind of like the fact that we got through the first age quickly, as opposed to, I don't know, really dragging out the Maze Runner in your first age. I don't know. Maybe there's something a little off with that. I don't know. There's always interesting things to think about. That's what makes it fun. But then the other 2 ages, Stone Ship and Channelwood, they have the 2 halves of the piece of paper. And the reason I did Channelwood last, this is one of the best examples of travel. Efficient travel, where I was just like, yes, I just nailed this one. Doing Channelwood last worked really well, because I kind of had that little angry tantrum, which is only possible as the explorer, where I found the vault, I found the page. I found the white page, and I was all angry about it, going back into Channelwood for the blue page, which just so happened to be placed right next to the machine where we found out about a page. Right? So it was like, good riddance, white page. There's this moment in part 28 where I'm like, I know it's part 28, where I'm just like, good riddance, white page. Oh wait, the message we found right here, it's literally right there. The message we found right there mentioned a page. Maybe that was it. Whoops. I really liked that, because there's a very convenient coincidence there in just how it all kind of comes together. And those are really kind of the things you aim for when planning these things out. You don't want... You like to avoid situations where you have to travel these really long ways when there's a more efficient way to do it. I mean, if you got to go back and get the blue page in Selenitic, that's a really long trip. But there's no other way to do it. So, I don't know. Another thing to keep in mind when you're scripting your path out is something that's actually related to adventure game design. There's kind of a rule of thumb in designing adventure games that you don't want to present the key before you present the lock. And what that means is, I mean, I don't know if that's what it's called, but what it means is that you don't want someone to find the solution to the puzzle before they find the actual puzzle, right? Because in that scenario, they may not even recognize that it is a puzzle, or if they do, they think the game is too easy, right? Because it's bad on both accounts, right? When you first find the key, it's just, I don't know what this is for, right? And then when you find the lock, it's just like, well, this isn't really an obstacle, right? When you find it in the other order, then it actually makes sense, right? You find the lock and you appreciate what it's blocking. You say, oh, this is something that I need. This is a puzzle I need to work on, and there's somewhere over there I really want to get to, but this obstacle is not letting me get there, right? So you create all those emotions, right? You create that whole sense about it that it's kind of the whole point of adventure games. Then you go back and you find the key and you appreciate, this is what I need to do that. And then when they open the door or whatever, then they get that sense, oh, I solved something, I accomplished something, I did it, right? Whereas the other way, it's just like you're just kind of just walking through the whole thing. Oh, I just found this, and then that was easy, right? And you never had any reason to take the time to stop and look around if you just blew right through that door. It was just like, oh, well, I'm already done here, right? So that's a bit of a tangent, but in adventure game design, you generally want to present the lock before you present the key. And the reason I say that is that, in my opinion, adventure game Let's Plays work better that way as well. You'd much rather present the locks before you present the keys, right? For the reasons that I've already talked about, which is you don't want to make the game too quick where you just kind of bulldoze your way through it. You want to actually take the time to appreciate what's going on in the game. The whole it fits explorer mode better, right? Because now you have an incentive to explore. If this barrier, if this puzzle, this lock is keeping you from progressing, then I guess we got to take a look around here. And you can see that I do this, that I present the locks first all the time, right? I mean, in the beginning of Real Mist, what do? I go around the entire island and I avoid the one place that allows you to solve anything, which is the library, and I go and examine all the locks. I go and just play around with all the places where we can't actually achieve anything yet, right? I'm showing all the locks, and then we go to the tower and find the keys. And I do this in Exile all the time, right? I guess Idana's a bit progressive, but and kind of linear, but in Voltaic and Amateria, you have some access to most of each age, and so what I do is I just take the grand tour. I just walk around and I just examine all the locks, right? What are all the puzzles here? What are all the obstacles? And you just kind of gain that appreciation. You get grounded, right? You just kind of, get a sense of your environment, and then you start going in and solving all the puzzles. And this is actually something that came up when I was contemplating what I would do in a hypothetical Let's Play series of Riven. Here he is again. I guess I'll spoil the game a little bit here, but at the very beginning of the game, you're on, one of the islands. It's got this big giant gold dome thing, but it has this puzzle right before it in this gold room, the gate room. So you got to solve that puzzle to get access to part of the gold dome. And then over there, you got to flip a few switches over there to power other things in the gold dome. Okay, so then when you leave that island, I don't know what to call that island. None of the islands actually have names in the game, so everybody just kind of came up with their own names for them. I usually call it Temple Island, but I've heard Gold Dome Island, and I don't remember all the other variants, but okay, Temple Island. So you leave Temple Island and you go explore a couple of the other islands, and then one of those other islands has this giant bridge that leads back over to Temple Island. And there's this bridge right at the edge that leads you back into the Gold Dome from another angle that you didn't have access to the first time. So the thing is this. If you solved that puzzle at the beginning, the gate room puzzle when you were first there, and you flip those switches, then when you make this big round trip over to these other islands and come back around, you just pull the little lever and the bridge comes down and you can walk right into that other area of the Gold Dome, right? And you can keep playing. Whereas if you didn't solve that puzzle and flip those switches, then you make this big long trip around and then you're stuck, right? That lever doesn't work and you can't get through that bridge. Okay. This is a problem with scripting out an LP here, because if you do solve the gate room puzzle at the beginning and flip those switches, you create a keys before the locks problem, right? Because you're flipping that switch without even knowing what it does. Well, you can look and see what it does, but you don't appreciate the obstacle, right? So maybe it would be better to not solve that puzzle at the beginning and just go all the way around and then get stuck. But then you have the other problem, what I was saying about efficient travel, right? Because you don't want to make that too boring, right? So if you don't solve that puzzle at the beginning, then you walk all the way around and then you hit that bridge. And now you appreciate, oh well, now I wish we had done this other thing or whatever. But now you got to walk all the way back around. I mean, I don't walk, because they're islands, but and you get over here and you got to solve the puzzle, and then you got to go around again, right? And it's just this catch-22 where you have you can either have a key before lock problem, or you can have a huge amount of travel. And then there's something I really don't want to do. I mean, you could do this if it's your style, but I mean, you could cut the travel out, just kind of jump cut out of travel time. I don't like to do that because I like to, immerse the viewer into kind of, here we are, we're playing the game, it's real time, I can't skip through the boring parts of the travel, so you can't either, even though you have the little fast forward button. Even though I'm going to always try to cram moderately interesting commentary in the whole thing, so hopefully you don't do that, but, details. My point is that it's just kind of interesting that those two things I talked about, with travel and key before lock, that they kind of create a problem together in this particular scenario in Riven, and it's not the reason I haven't done an LP of Riven. It would just be a huge project. That's really kind of the main thing. But then, I mean, there are ways around it. There are ways around that problem, definitely. There were other problems as well. It's just that in order to, all these things that I've talked about would yield pretty unsatisfying results, in my opinion. So to get around it, I have ideas, not sure how well they'd work out, but it would take a lot of work. But yeah, this is not a video talking about hypothetical Let's Plays of Ribbon. This is talking about philosophy of my Let's Plays, so let's get back to that. So I guess the last element to discuss here would be the commentary. I mainly consider the commentary, I guess, as kind of the glue that holds the whole series together. I see the commentary as serving two basic functions. The first one is, I guess, kind of the obvious one that everybody already understands, that it's the way you, of course, inject your own personality into the series, right? It's what makes it uniquely you, right? It's obvious. I don't need to go into this, okay? But the other, I guess, somewhat more subtle thing that it does is that it provides a motive for everything you're doing, right? Everything I talked about when I was talking about travel, for example, when you reason out how you're going to travel through the game, a lot of it is somewhat practical, right? I want to go on this path instead of that path because, it's shorter, right? It's something that, they might both be equally valid, but, I want the one that's going to, save time. But why did I go that way instead of this way, right? Maybe it would have may have in the moment have seemed to make more sense why we go that way, right? So now I can kind of fabricate an excuse for why we went the other way. I guess kind of a somewhat silly example of this would be right at the beginning of Real Mist when I'm exploring Mist Island and I'm going through all the different locations. Then I arrive at the library and I say, this doesn't have a marker switch, therefore this building isn't important, therefore we're not going to go inside, right? Two complete non sequiturs, right? It's completely goofy, but at least it provided some motive for not going in the library just then, right? The real motive, of course, was what I explained before, is that I don't want to show the keys before the locks. That's the actual reason. But I don't want to say that because that ruins the whole act, right? So the commentary just kind of, it creates kind of a fake motive on top of the real motive with something that's really going on behind the scenes, okay? So that's the other thing about the other kind of opportunity, I guess, that I seize with the commentary. Because otherwise, when you read down these things, it would just be really awkward, right? You don't want to get in a situation where it would seem in the moment you should go this way, but you really need to go that way, and you don't provide any reason for this, right? It's just really bad to be walking along and then just kind of stop and just go like, and let's not do the obvious. Let's go over here, right? That's a big no-no, in my opinion. So, yeah, that's and I guess I bring this up because I think I've seen people do that before, and it's like, no, don't do it that way, right? You gotta come up with some excuse, even if it's really lame excuse, because then those are funny, right? Just don't do the awkward pause and change direction. Okay, so those are all, I guess, the basic elements, at least all the ones I'm thinking of right now. I'm really looking forward to the next video where I can actually delve into the details of a specific example. I'll have the whole thing up and actually walk through the steps of how I'm going to get through this next part of Space Quest. So then things won't be so abstract, and we can actually get kind of more. A lot of this was kind of top level down, and then but with the specific example, we can get into that nitty gritty detail of like, why do you say this comment here and then walk over there instead of walk over there, then make the comment, or I don't know, just some just kind of that stuff right there in the moment, which is not really what I talked about here. So yeah, I guess I don't really have anything more to say. I need to now. My next thing, I'm gonna kill this video, then I'm gonna go right to the next recording where I actually break down that video. So I guess I'll see you later.